You're not building authority solely based on what you know.
We're going to be chatting with Devin Bramhall about how solopreneurs can build authority in their market.
You're building authority by what you contribute to the community.
We're going to explore the benefits of being brave and asking for what you want.
It isn't ever about knowing your future. It's about knowing your now. And where I see people get the most stuck is in the asking part.
The power of being confident in the choices that you make.
It's not about being fearless. It's about being full of fear and using that as your energy to go forward.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Plugin.fm. My name is Patrick Rauland, and I'm here with my new co-host, Goran Mirkovic, content marketing specialist and the CMO at Freemius. With all the house cleaning out of the way, let's jump in. Welcome to the show, Devin.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's so great to be here.
I am really excited to chat with you.
Yes.
So normally I'd say we do a little bit of a longer intro where we like to build up our guests so that they have authority, but that is what today's topic is all about. So I would love to hear from you. Who are you and why should people listen to you?
Yes. Well, first of all, I love that we are not doing those traditional intros because they always make me squirm. So thank you very much. And my simple answer is they shouldn't listen to me. They shouldn't, nobody, the authority that I've built doesn't deserve anything, right? It's my job to keep earning it from the people that I want to help. And so they shouldn't do anything. Why I think why certain people could benefit from that is because of my career, right? And so I have a long experience in the B2B SaaS world, in marketing in particular, and growing agencies. I've done a lot of sort of side hustly things, from growing content marketing groups that were built for education and networking and career development, to starting my own event series in B2B SaaS. I have a podcast where myself and Margaret Kelsey talk about sort of the leadership situation in marketing right now, kind of instead of going for tactics now, we're like, okay, we've been in this industry for a long time. We see now that there are problems at the leadership level that just aren't being talked about. And so, why someone might follow me is because I have a ton of experience. I've done a lot of things, and therefore I have some perspective. I have some skills and talents, and, I might be able to help them level up in their career in some way, but nobody should. And you come at it like that, I'm like, nah.
Yeah. I can speak from first-hand experience as a person who used to work with Devin for a couple of years, that, Devin is a type of leader that usually, leads by example. And everyone I know in marketing who has some contact with Devin has said the same thing, that she is a magnetic personality that just kind of lures you in with her energy. And I'm just excited to really take a topic like this and just kind of dissect it really to what it actually means, building, authority versus giving people some playbooks or, something that feels kind of scripted and lazy, and just talked about firsthand experiences with someone who I know personally is an authority in the space.
Thank you, Goran. I will never forget our first interview. When I interviewed him for he was interviewing for a strategist role. And I was like, this is one of the most interesting conversations I've ever had in the hiring process ever. We were legit bantering. He didn't sit there and try to answer my questions, right? He's like, this is what I think. And I was like, well, what about? And it was that's when I knew. I was like, please come work here.
Thank you. I will again.
There are some people who just have that confident vibe, and that definitely gives you an authority or just a confidence. Yeah.
Yeah. Look at all those people who are basically saying nothing on LinkedIn and are very confident about it. And people follow them for some reason. Right. And so it's that's why I say, I'm That you shouldn't do anything. Like vet for yourself, see what's resonating and what works for you. Because God knows there's plenty confident people like me out there pretending like they know stuff. And I'm one of them.
Well, okay, so you've done a lot in your career. You went from basically content to the CEO role. I don't know many people that have done that. It seems rare to me. Now that you have a title, titles give authority, right? But before you have a title, how do you build authority? How do you get people to listen to you?
That is a great question. I would say the first thing that I did, starting before I was even trying to get the CEO role, was I believed in my own ideas. And so I remember I was working in marketing for this little baby startup called SpringPad back in Boston. It was my first time in a content marketing role. And we were trying to solve a problem, which was in our local network, we weren't very well known. And so they were trying to build authority locally in the Boston area. And I started off going to all these events, these networking events. And that was exhausting. There were so many to go to. And I thought, what if I bring the people to me? Then I do one event and I meet tons of people, but it's mine, right? And there's a more lasting impression for the brand. And that's why I created the Master Slam. And I will never forget, there was no reason. I had no authority. There was no reason for anyone to do it. And I asked my boss to introduce me to Mark O'Toole, who was running a PR agency in Boston at the time, very well known, like big deal. And I just called him up and I was like, hey man, I'm doing this event. Here's what it entails. Here's what I need you to do. And I was like, and I really want you to say yes. I was like, I really just want, I know it sounds weird, but just like say yes and trust me. And he was like, honestly, I have no idea what this is. I don't fully understand it, but it sounds really cool. I'm in. And, I think the lesson I learned from that is like that fake it till you make it, that having confidence before you should, and just believing in yourself, like that is it. I would have to say that like just having a relentless desire and focus on getting what I wanted in my career and going, moving at the pace that I wanted, that I was ready for, or actually not always ready for. That really does a lot to tune out the noise around like, can I do this? Like, did I have those thoughts? Absolutely. But just being so focused on what I wanted just kind of helped me like ignore those most of the time and keep going. And that's an important start. That's a very important start. The second thing was in sort of like that middle period. I mean, literally, hold on, let me go back for a second. The confidence was the first thing. The second thing was I was always very clear on what I wanted and I asked for it. So when I was working at SpringPad as a customer service person, I wanted to move into content marketing. I got another job that wasn't even content marketing, went to my then CEO and was like, I know we don't even have like a role for this right now, but this is what I want to do. And I was like, and he was like, okay, go to Jacqueline. She's about to take over for me as CEO, buddy up to her. And I didn't even tell him I had another job. I just did it so I had the confidence that like, if they were like, no, and how dare you ask, I wouldn't feel threatened and I could go at it with confidence. And I did that every step of the way in my career.
I generally like to start a project with the end in mind, but Devin doesn't believe that you need to know the future. You just need to know what's valuable for you to do right now. Keep listening to see why.
One thing that I noticed that you said here, which I think is really interesting, you basically said that you always knew what you wanted to do. But for most people, I think that part is actually really hard because their goals are usually like, I want to make X amount of money, or like, I want to be in this position because of reasons, right? They're not really kind of super clear on what they want. So Can you share some basic advice how you basically, kind of narrow down that one thing, what you really, really want? Because like all of us have a lot of different ideas, and like getting to what you want in this sense, as you said, basically showing up and, just constantly showing up and asking questions requires like really set determination to the goal that you outlined.
No, I'm glad you asked that because I should clarify. I, at no moment, including now, have had any idea what I wanted to do with my career or life. Like, I've got some stuff that I'm going to do for the next year and a half, but like, so it was more that in a moment where I did know what I wanted, and it was usually very small and specific. I want to be a content marketer. I want to be a content marketing manager. I want to work on like develop this skill set, which requires me to go in and put myself out there for this project that's happening, right? And so it isn't ever about knowing your future. It's about knowing your now. And where I see people get the most stuck is in the asking part, because they limit themselves. They're like, well, there isn't an opportunity here for me to do that. There's no role like that. Well, they've said no to me in the past. Well, like they develop all these reasons why they can't. And I say, just ignore them, go and ask for it anyway. And then if you don't get it, like keep agitating until you get it. And if you don't get it, go find it somewhere else.
We're kind of talking about marketing this season, but this kind of applies to your whole career, everything in life. I am shocked at how many people don't ask for what they want. Like just and you know what? It can be scary, and you can take some steps like you did to have a backup option ready to go. But just ask. You would be shocked at how many people. So sometimes you're like, man, they'll never give it to me, and you just ask. And you're like, oh wow, I got a raise just from asking people for a raise. I didn't know it could be that easy.
Yeah, I kind of have similar experience, and it actually ties back to Devon and like how I ended up in like the company that she used to run. Can you just refresh my memory? How many people you interviewed for the strategist position when I was applying? Like 1,000?
Not quite 1,000, but it was. Look, that was we had a lot of applicants, like hundreds. For every single role. There were we had to ultimately filter hundreds of people. It was very, very hard to get to the interview stage. So to be perfectly honest, we didn't interview that many people. And that's because it took a while before you got to me. And it was really hard to get there. It helps to think about a couple things. One, someone saying no to you doesn't mean anything about you, honestly. Even if the reason they said no was because of you or you weren't qualified or something, it still doesn't mean anything about you, right? A smart person will take that situation and one, ask for feedback for, why they were turned down, just in case there's something that they can develop in them, right? But most of them, after that, it's see what you can get and learn from it. And then go and try again. People say no to me all the time. I've been fired for who I am as a person. They're like, we don't want you specifically to work here. And I'm like, and looking back, I'm like, actually, that kind of makes sense. And so don't what do you have to fear? I always tell people, I'm like, okay, so what happens if they say no? And they're like, well, it's not going to feel good. I'm like, okay, well, what happens after that? You're not going to feel good. And they're like, well, they can't make their own argument. And so I'm like, why not take the chance? The second thing is, remember that every single thing in business is made up. Everything. These invisible rules that people feel constrained by and then get resentful before they've taken any action. They're like, well, it's just that way. I'm like, listen, I was a woman in tech during a time when no one gave any mind to DEI. I remember starting at this one company and I couldn't figure out why they gave me everything I wanted coming in. I was like, I want direct reports. I want to run these 2 departments. I want this title. And I came in and I was like, oh, I'm the only girl here. You needed a girl. And so like whatever you think, there's no Wizard of Oz behind the scenes, like dictating how everything should be. There's no God in business. At any given moment, every single business person is breaking the rules if they can to create a unique advantage for themselves. So why not do it yourself? I have played the system since I was a child, right? I went to college when I was 16 with by just getting a GED, which in America is like anyone can take the GED when they turn 16 and a half. Like I got into NYU without SAT scores because I suck at testing. I didn't end up going there because it turns out there was
a lot of tests.
No, they accepted me. I just didn't go because it was too expensive. And then I became a big fish in a small pond. And by the time I left college, there was literally a billboard with my face on it in the city on 93. Like there was they launched an entire ad campaign on the subway system that literally was like Devin Bramhall, class of 2006. And like, because they were like, look, and this is business, right? This wasn't because I deserved it. It wasn't because I was such a great person. It was because from a business standpoint, because I had gotten involved in so many different programs at the school, strategically, it made sense to launch with me because in highlighting one person, they were able to showcase many different departments in the university and how one can be successful through them, right? And if you get that, like, take that mindset, take all the personal stuff away and what's right and wrong and stop. That's not what business is about. Business is about fairness. It's not about equality, and it never will be, ever. And so what you have to do is go in, and if you want something, if it seems impossible, go become a strategist on your own behalf and try to get it. And sometimes you will, and sometimes you won't.
The marketing world uses a lot of jargon. What does the word content even mean? The word is hard to define, and that makes doing content marketing challenging. Listen to what Devin suggests you do instead of creating content. A good chunk of our audience are people who develop their own software or run small software teams. And so a lot of authority does come, I think we've been talking about in-person stuff, which is really important, but also we communicate online. Lots of people communicate via blogs and newsletters and the written word. So I would love to talk a little bit about content, and specifically, why shouldn't we say content? Why is that a no-no in your world?
It's my vendetta against buzzwords. The marketing world is guilty of using too much jargon. And when you use words that don't have inherent meaning and they're highly interpretable, you're not communicating clearly and effectively. And that, especially in the B2B space, is really important because, as you mentioned, B2B SaaS is largely run by product people, engineering people. And even when you think about marketers nowadays, the marketing function that B2B SaaS serves is very technical these days, right? In not completely, but the foundations are very technical. And so there is a lot of value in speaking with specificity and clarity. That's how you build authority. And I think that's something that especially these product and engineering founders, they do that really well inherently, which is why it's so easy for them to build authority in their space. Because it's simple and straightforward. That audience is very simple. If you say smart things, you will build authority. That's it. And so just say smart things, contribute net new, code or thoughts on code or, whatever, perspective. It isn't as political or it's not so much about who's popular as marketing. And so that's why I think content is a useless word, is replace content, right? Pretend content's I'm using air quotes, content is any word that doesn't have meaning on its own, and replace it with the actual thing you're talking about. And automatically your words will have more power and influence and authority.
There's this is reminding me of I generally read a lot of business books, but I do remember reading one or two books about writing. And definitely just one of the pieces of advice is always to use the action verb that describes the exact thing you're talking about, as opposed to Patrick makes this thing do this thing. It's like Patrick does this thing.
Yes.
It's just always more direct and more obvious to people. Yeah, so let's say you're a founder, you're putting on your marketing hat, and you're like, we're going to create content. But what does that mean? Doesn't mean anything. But even if you just change that to even if you just change content to code tutorials, excellent. Wow, that's even that is like so much more focused and specific that you can tell that to someone else on your team and they can do it with you or for you or in conjunction with you.
And this is why I don't believe in playbooks, because even among that, right? You see, that's the perfect example. It's like, okay, say code tutorials, but then I don't think every founder should do code tutorials. It depends on the software that you're developing and the customers that you're serving. And a lot of times what these founders don't realize, and what's so much like what I love about working with them, is I'm like, you know your customer already. You know what they want. So all you have to do is give it to them. And so usually the answer of like which content it is, like what words you fill it in with, or words, is like right there in front of them. They just have to do it.
Sometimes marketing can be too abstract, and sometimes it's also just very obvious. It's like oftentimes someone's like, "Oh, I read these 3 blogs or these 3 or listen to these 3 podcasts." Then you should make content like that, or you should submit content to them and see if they'll publish it for you. Like it's sometimes marketing is obvious, and you just need to like take that first step.
Yeah. I remember we had a client at Animals a way back, and it was a software for like insurance brokers or something. And I remember talking to the guy, the head of marketing there, and I was like, all right, man, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, these guys probably are not Googling like answers to their questions. And he was like, you are right. They're very analog. I was like, cool. So there's probably like 3 conferences a year that all of them go to. And he was like, correct. I was like, so what you really need is for us to make something that you can literally print out and bring to this conference. Am I right? And it was like, and it's true, right? And but that's content. That's content in the modern age still. And people don't realize that. I think a lot of founders come in and they're like, well, I have to do social. I'm like, no, you don't. Where are your people?
So there's a lot of small teams that listen to this, and there's also solopreneurs, right? People who generally are a team of one. Do you have any advice on what a solopreneur should do just in terms of creating content? And I have a quick thesis. I think you should focus on the channel you're best at or more passionate about, just because you'll actually get it done. Your thoughts on that?
I think so. Yes, as long as that's where your customers are. If your customers are there too, that's great. I think solopreneurs their job is very simple. Go where your customers are. Hopefully that's also where you love to be, and only go there. Forget all the other places. And do 2 things. Yes, talk about, your thoughts and opinions and strategy in the area, that's probably like 2/3. And then 1/3 is tell people what you do, tell them you're for hire and how to get in touch with you. Like that should be happening on a monthly basis. And let me give you an example. When I left Animals, the first, all I did was like post on LinkedIn once. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing now. Like I didn't even have a plan. And I think, the first 6 months I made like $100,000 in consulting work because again, by then I'd been here for a long time. Animals at that point was had a good reputation and everybody knew it and, whatever. So, but after that, there comes this natural lull. And I was like, okay. And so I was posting on LinkedIn. I spoke at Inbound. I did all this stuff. And I was like, I don't understand why people aren't knocking down my door again. And I talked to a friend of mine and she was like, Kate DeLeo, actually, who's really good at this stuff. She was like, well, did you tell anybody what you're doing? Have you said that you're available? Have you? And I was like, no. Like I literally, she's like, so you think people are just gonna like bang down your door just because you exist? She's like, Queen, that's not how it works. And I was like, fair. Because everybody was like, oh, so you make a podcast now? Because that was like the top thing in my LinkedIn, and everything else was kind of like secondary. I had a 1-page website. Like no one knew what I didn't even know what I did. I didn't even have services. I just like made it all up in the beginning based on what people asked me for. And so it was like, I was like, oh yeah. So it's like, yes, you do need to create content in the channels where your potential customers are. That content needs to offer something net new to the conversation. And you need to regularly say, hi, I'm available for hire me, and ask your friends, hi, will you share, like you have to do the bottom funnel work too and close. You can't just sit there in the world of content and put stuff out. I am firsthand solopreneur example.
Fantastic. Love it. Goran, I think you had a couple questions.
Yeah. My main thing here is, I think if we're kind of boiling this down to basically building authority, and let's say, Devin is born again and like all the prior experience and authority and relationship don't exist, and you're now starting like from ground zero. And so we have like two components that we shared here. One is, the key to building authority is specificity and showing up. And so I think about these two components, but like for someone who is not like a natural communicator, especially like a more technical person, can we offer some advice or like mechanism to how to actually get to specificity, right? And showing up, because I think like those are the two main components that actually kind of check that mark.
Yeah. Well, actually, so to Patrick's example of like picking a channel that you are enthusiastic about, when I started being more deliberate about my solopreneur brand and getting business, one of the things that I was really worried about was staying in the conversation, remaining relevant and out there. And that is one of the biggest drivers behind launching Don't Say Content with Margaret. Was like, I just need to make sure that my brand is still out there. I love recording podcasts. Let's record. I want to talk about on a more strategic level, because those are the people that I want to be my customers, right? Like, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to do like a content calendar for you anymore. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm way too expensive for that. Right. And so that was a way for me to be constantly out there, my brand's still out there, maintain my authority. And the reason I bring that up in relation to your question is because similarly with, say, like an engineer, they can absolutely be out there on their Reddit threads and all the other forums that are less visible. Like, there's this misconception that like building authority means like you have to be popular on LinkedIn or Twitter or anywhere public. It's like, no, Animals started off as a speakeasy brand. We started off where I used to say to people, I'm like, look, if you're in the know, you know us. But like, I go out in the world and it's not like people are like, oh my God, Animals, like outside our tiny pond, like B2B marketing, it's a small pond within a small pond of B2B SaaS, right? I mean, overall, what is it? Software company is like overall like 3% of the overall economy. And it's like B2B SaaS, like B2B companies within that, it's like tiny.
Plus, Animals didn't serve like the full spectrum of B2B SaaS, but like with specific like Series A, Series B, like companies that actually
later on, yeah. I mean, we started off smaller,
so
but
it's even smaller.
To build authority, you don't have to be on any one platform. You don't have to be on Facebook or Google Ads or LinkedIn. You can build authority even if it's underground and you're recommended from person to person. Listen as Devin digs into how Animals started.
I just focused really hard on building authority in my small pond. I didn't go for millions of followers. I didn't go for, that kind of like YouTube, TikTok audience. I was like, those aren't my people, right? It's kind of Goran, similar to like when we were like kind of latching on Animals to this sort of long tail keyword strategy. It was like top of funnel keywords just it's a vanity metric. It brings you lots of people, most of whom are never going to buy from you. It's like it kind of compromises your lower funnel metrics, right? And so we were like, look, less traffic that converts better. Like, doesn't that sound better to you? So I think that's why it's like, this is an easier time than ever to build authority, because it's like, you don't need tons of volume. You just need to be where your people are, contribute something net new, show up constantly, like engage with others, right? So it's not just about you being a megaphone. It's like you're engaging in your community. And I think the reason why I think that is so valuable is because at that point, you're not building authority solely based on what you know. You're building authority by what you contribute to the community, the value that you bring to other people on a one-to-one basis. And you're helping build other people up, you're answering their questions. And that second part is way stickier and long lasting than your knowledge.
One of the best metrics to measure your content success is how often people invite you to participate in projects. If you're being invited, you're being noticed, and people are also impressed with your work. Devin digs into that coming up.
This is all great advice, but I think what most people need to realize that obviously building authority is a marathon, right? And so the level of engagement that you need to put in is obviously a lot. And how do you, since this is you mentioned a cool thing, it's completely different than chasing keywords and stuff like that. And for instance, for most people, they can measure keywords, see if they're trends are in Ahrefs or SEMrush going up. But how do you measure, what are the signals that your approach is getting stickier? Do you have any advice, or is it just the standard smell test? You can see if your conversations are rotten or not.
I mean, look, I've never paid much attention to metrics when it came to my own authority building at all. I think what the signals that stood out to me, though, were when more people invited me to do stuff with them, right? Like when Jay Kunzo, back when I was just starting out, was like, hey, will you be on the board of Boston Content? And then later when he and Aristia, who founded it, were both wanting to move on from it, they were like, hey, Devin, will you run it now? Will you be the executive director? Or, when I got invited by the Startup Institute to give a seminar, and then I made it a regular thing. When I pitched a class to General Assembly, and they're like, great, attendance was amazing. Will you keep doing this? And then it kept being amazing. And so I kept, it's like, you're a person with a logical mind. Don't overcomplicate it. If people are responding to you, now look, when you're just starting out, it's going to be tricky, especially if you're trying to measure your authority based on how many people engage with you online, because that does take time, right? And to a certain extent, you are gaming the system a little bit. But the people I know who have been really effective, and actually Maria Delano is one of them. Actually, two people, Maria Delano and Erica Schneider, are two people, came out of nowhere. And by the time I noticed them, well, Maria came to me when she was still building her authority. She started a marketing consultancy and was building up that business. And she found people that had influence, and she asked their advice, and she took them out to lunch. And she was unapologetic about it. She'd ask for advice whenever she wanted it. I had to say, she waited until I said no, right? And she all of a sudden was on the map. She's giving all these talks, and everybody knows her. And it's this really kind of cool, it's just she just shot up in 2 years, I think. And same with Erica Schneider. The funniest thing about Erica, she's one of my good friends now, but Erica Schneider, by the time I knew who she was, she had 80,000 followers on LinkedIn. Everybody knew her. She seemed famous. And I remember inviting her to a cocktail party I had before the Audience Plus conference earlier this year, because it was right across the street from my house. And I was like, cha-ching. So I was like, cool, let me invite people who are going to be going, right, who are in the area. I was intimidated to meet her. I was like, surely she's too cool for me, but I'm going to invite her. She was like, Devin, I came to an event that Jimmy did for Superpath like 2 years ago, and you were there. And I was like, what? I don't remember meeting you. She's like, yeah, you were too busy. Like, people kept talking to you. And I was like, a little, like, whatever. We didn't end up meeting. She showed me the photo and I was like, you were there. Oh my God. Right. So it's like, we were both looking at each other like, holy shit. Right. And I would say that both Maria and Erica, they did it faster. They were more strategic than me, because at the moment where they were launching themselves, they knew what they wanted in that moment. I wouldn't say that either of them are like, I know what I want with my life, but they were both had something they were trying to build, and say that they were focused about, kind of making it go as fast as they could. Startups do the same thing all the time. It's why they hire content marketers, right? And so, sure, we have to say it's a marathon. We do, because you never know. When you're dealing with organic authority building, like, you never know. But people run marathons at different paces. And the people who are able to run faster train harder. They work harder. Sure, there's like physical gifts and all that, but like, this isn't a show about athleticism, so I'm going to like gloss over that, right? But it's like, at the end of the day, if you want to run a marathon, you have to train for it. You have to work for it. You have to work for it constantly, and you have to forego other things, right? You're not out partying the night before a 10-mile run. So,
yep. Having run one marathon and nearly dying from it, I can attest to, you do have to make some sacrifices and you do have to train. Fun fact, Devon, I thought walking to work was training for the first time I tried to run a marathon. It was not. I did not finish that marathon. But there is something to just trying and failing miserably, not failing miserably, but failing. And then, by the way, I learned that, and I did the work, and I finished the marathon the next year. But the audacity can sometimes help you get through big projects of just like, I'm just going to try this. I'm just going to ask this person for exactly what I want. And sometimes you get what you want, and sometimes you learn, oh, this is how I have to ask next time.
It's like, I love that. I always thought this whole idea of failure was bogus, because it's like, no, it doesn't mean, like, failure doesn't mean you ask for something or you try to make something happen and it doesn't work. Failure is giving up.
Yes.
Right? Failure is not acting. Failure is assuming you're not going to get what you want. Like, that is failure. Failure is not going for something and not doing it right the first time. You're like, oh, there are running programs for this. Like, cool.
Yeah.
So I 100% agree with you. I really I love that you said that. And that's like really important to me too.
If I was a solopreneur, and sometimes like, you don't even know if your idea is going to work, or it's like a side hustle, and you're like, wow, can I spin this up to be big enough to be my full-time hustle? I guess my question is, how do you balance short-term immediate authority building to like, I want to see if this side hustle works in the next 6 months. But I do also think there's something about, like, I also have authority as an individual that lasts decades, that is a little bit separate from maybe a software project I'm kind of trying to promote, or a landing page for a course I'm trying to sell. Like, I guess, how do you balance like short-term and long-term authority building?
I will give you an example of myself right now. So I'm known in the B2B marketing world, and therefore me going out and saying, I'm a consultant now, and, I'm great at making agencies a lot of money, super profitable, and I'm really great at making, B2B SaaS brands a thing with marketing. And so that's a place where it's like, cool, I have authority there. I can continue to build on that. I had an opportunity come my way this summer by a publisher. I'm writing a book on B2B content marketing. Like, that's the sort of like long-term, I'm continuing to do that. Right. Then there's the sort of side hustle balance of like, trying something, and maybe in an area where you don't already have that authority. I am launching a YouTube channel, and I am not going to be talking about marketing or business strategy or any of that. I'm going after a completely new audience. And my strategy for doing that was, one, hire an expert who can help me with the science. Right? Like, I know what I wanted to talk about generally. I know how to be on video and be relatable and all of that. But I was like, I don't know how YouTube works. And so I found a guy, his name is Finn McKenty, and he charges $3,000 for this like program where it's like, it gets you to recording and publishing your first video. He teaches you the science and math. He runs you through the narratives so you can clarify like who you're talking to, what you're saying, helps you with all the technical of like, look, here's what a top of funnel video on YouTube looks like, right? And then I'm just going to try it and see. That's the whole plan. I was like, I have something I want to try and a cohort of people I want to be helping more. I want to make money off it. And I don't know how YouTube works. So like originally I thought I was going to be talking about marketing. And then through the process, he was like, you could appeal to a way broader audience. Like you actually don't like nobody in B2B marketing is really on YouTube anyway. Like this is not where your people are. And I was like, cool. Yeah, you're right. They're on LinkedIn and I know where they are already. And so I had an idea. I got help and now I'm just trying it.
Yeah, I think this is especially interesting what you said about help, because I think like for most people, even who have like a depth in like subject matter expertise, and let's say that you are like a solopreneur or like a, like a developer who like has figured out the solution and now you want to be vocal about it, but you don't really have like the necessary, experience or communication skills to just kind of talk about it. Do you think it's like beneficial for people to first kind of get like empowered or like get some like external help on like how to refine their process before they run? Or it's just like, run and break stuff and,
Guys,
collect yourself from the ground and like...
I've never been qualified for anything in my life. I didn't know how to be a CEO. I was just like, I want this. I think I can do it, right? And this is what I tell women, especially all the time. I'm like, how many men do you know, like, who went out and asked for something? We're like, I'm going to make sure I study first. They were like, hey, I just want to do this. I want this. And I was like, that is a really admirable approach because it's brave. Actually, that is probably the best. That's the whole thing. It's brave in multiple different ways. It's putting yourself out there. It's doing something that you don't know how to do and are probably kind of scared to do, even though you want it. Like you're just throwing 3 sheets to the wind. You're just like, you know what? I'm just going to see what happens.
Do you think that...
Fun. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think that level of like unpreparedness actually helps with build authenticity? Like...
I think being authentic builds authenticity. One of the pieces of feedback that I have gotten consistently throughout my life across anybody I've met, they say almost the exact same way too. They're like, what I love about you is you're exactly the same everywhere you show up. And guess what? I'm not polished. My friend was like, she really needed my help today. And she was like, oh my God. And I was like, yep, I've got to record a podcast, but it's all good. They'll be fine with it. And she was like, but, and I was like, who cares? Like let me say this better. I don't care. I'm like, if you want me to do something, you want me for me, and you're not going to be like, oh, your background isn't right. Or like, I heard the baby take a big poo, which actually happened during the actual recording. Like, it doesn't matter. And that stuff adds to it in a lot of times, it's like, that's the real world. It's like it's how I built authority as a leader, because all these young people were like, oh, she doesn't act all CEO-y, right? They're like, she talks to me like a human. And so I think that like, we're in an age where it's not the 90s anymore. It's not about the suit you wear or the hairstyle or like your card stock, right? It's about you contributing something net new to the conversation, being entertaining, and continuing to show up so people have a chance to get to know you. And then they'll show you along the way what tweaks they need from you, right? What they like and don't like. And you'll make those alterations. And, it's like, it's easier than ever, I think. And so I see it as no excuse not to try.
The things that you just summarized, But I think the last one is I loved just be brave and be out there. Like there's just you cannot imagine. Maybe it's 20%. Maybe 20% of the time I ask someone for a thing, they give me it, and I'm like pleasantly surprised they gave it to me.
That's a good conversion rate.
But like 20% of the things I want for almost no effort, other than the risk of someone saying the nominal risk of my ego being bruised if someone says no. Is just really, really powerful. And I also really appreciate your positivity here, Devon. I think there's a lot to be said about you have no idea what's going to come. So you might, it's about being brave and about asking, but I think being positive and I'm taking a lot away from this.
One thing on the bravery too, and Goran will remember this because that was one of my values at Animals. Bravery to me means doing something you're so terrified to do that your entire body is telling you to run in the other direction and doing it anyway. I have been uncomfortable my entire career. I'm uncomfortable right now. What the fuck do I know about starting a YouTube channel? And like, you know what I mean? It's like, there's even consulting. I'm like, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Like I made it up. And so like, it's not about being fearless. It's about having tons of fear. It's about being full of fear and using that as your energy to go forward.
Yes. Yeah. It's having fear and still taking a step forward. I love it. Thank you so much, Devon, for joining us and for sharing your insights.
This is one of my favorite podcasts I've been on. You guys run a really interesting interview. I enjoyed this so much. Thank you.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, like, subscribe, and tell your friends so that we can carry on enticing awesome guests like Devon to join us and share their remarkable journeys with you. And if you subscribe through the website, you'll get early bird access to our future content. Plugin.fm is brought to you by Freemius, your all-in-one payments, subscriptions, and taxes platform for selling software plugins, themes, and software as a service. If you're struggling to grow your software revenue, send a note to contact@freemius.com to get free advice from Freemius's monetization experts. My name is Patrick Rauland, and thanks for listening to Plugin.fm.